Welcome to Inner Peace with Dr. Reese, a program that can help you become liberated in the modern world. Now, here's your host, Dr. Kevin W. Reese.
So are you ready to go deeper into the divine? Welcome to episode number 69. Today, I'm talking to Dr. Gabriel Cousens. Not only is he one of the most known holistic doctors of this era, but he's also a rabbi and spiritual teacher. This episode is packed. We're going to talk about the Essenes, the ancient Jewish mystics who studied with Jesus. We're going to talk about Dr. Cousens moving with his family to India for 7 years when he was 30 years old, and then coming back and getting into Kabbalah and the Essenes and becoming a rabbi. And with that knowledge of East and West, we'll compare the Vedas to the Torah. At 77 years old, we'll discuss how he's maintaining such a healthy life and how he does 1,000 push-ups 3 times a week. We're going to talk about him leaving his body and God telling him to go back to be a blessing to the world, and an incident he had in a cave looking over the Dead Sea when Abraham appeared to him. Dr. Cousens, welcome to the podcast.
Well, I'm very happy to be here, and I love to support spiritual seekers.
Speaking of that, how would you explain to someone who the Essenes were?
So the Essenes were one of the 3 major groups in those times. And they saw themselves as doers of the Torah. They're also the prophetic mystics of the desert. And that's something that kind of works more for most people. Now, most people think they were just at Qumran, okay? And Qumran is in the desert. It's actually next to the River Jordan. I go there probably once a year. But the fact is, they were all over the Middle East. They were in Lake Mareotis in Egypt. They were in Damascus. They were actually up by the Sea of Galilee. That was actually the big center. So, Sermon on the Mount, that's that whole area there.
Right.
So really all over the Middle East. And they were more seriously spiritually committed. And their inner core was live food. Then you have the vegan outer core. And you still have in Israel at least 8.6% of the population is vegan. So that whole energy is continued. So they were basically vegans. They were healers, in a sense, prophets of the desert. A lot of people came through and trained with them. So what people don't understand, they actually were a training center. And
like a mystery school.
They were a mystery school, and some people felt, oh, they're just men. No, there were women there when they looked at the bones. There were definitely women's bones in there. And they became, let's say, more active about 186 BC.
Is it safe to say that Jesus was an Essene?
What it's safe to say, okay, which in my opinion, because there's some controversy, he studied with the Essenes until he was 30. The Essenes in the Sea of Galilee, where he was brought up with, including his relatives. So his was the Sea of Galilee kind of gathering. And I've been there multiple times, where Peter's house was. I've been there. So yes, it's safe to say it in general. Say I'm an Essene. He studied with them, and then in the 3 years, as part of the Essene tradition, that was like from 30 to 33, is kind of when kind of a final stage. so to speak. And I think that's probably the most accurate. There's so many things, and I could get real controversial, which are outer things, but his teachings were the Essene teachings. He also was a mix between the Pharisees. He was like a bridge. There's a book called Jesus the Pharisee. So he was broader, let's say that. He was vegan, as far as we can tell. He did not eat meat, fish, chicken, or dairy. His brother James is said to have only water and vegetables. And that's his brother, right? Do you think the family is going to be eating meat while his brother is growing up being a vegan? I don't think so. So we kind of know that he was at least vegan. I can't say he was live food. I think it's fair to say he was very much trained by the Essenes and had the spiritual vision of that. I've also been in the River Jordan where he took his, they call it the baptism. It's called a mikvah in the Jewish tradition.
Right.
So I've done that without clothes, right where it said where he did that. Everybody else was wearing clothes, but I kind of hid in a little area there and were able to do it. Because traditionally you don't wear a gown,
Right.
So that's kind of how my connection is. So, but I wouldn't say he's strictly an Essene. He was bigger than that.
Right. But he was a mystic.
Well, I'm going to say a step further. He was a mystic, but I'm going to say a liberated mystic of the desert.
Okay.
I think he was, my belief in everything I've read, he was self-realized.
Right.
Okay. So he was the prophetic liberated mystic of the desert. That's definitely a Essene archetype.
Now, there's a book that inspired me and many, many, many people over the years, and that's the Essene Gospel of Peace.
Yeah.
This book, for those that don't know, it sort of details Jesus with the Essenes, and he's talking about a lot of the health practices of the current holistic health scene.
Yeah.
Is there any verification that this is fact, or is this a story to convey a health message?
Here's how I would say. So Dr. Sekeli, who I did not know personally, but I've been to his home in Costa Rica, and I've followed him, and I also know a lot of people who trained with him, okay? I think he overstates it. This book is not found anywhere in the Vatican. No one's ever found it. In other words, it wasn't really, I think he created it. This is my best I can do in an understanding. This is nothing here is definitive. But he created to bring forth this teaching of holistic health. Okay? Did Jesus really say those things? I can't tell you that, and I don't think when they really look at the way the language is used, whether it even fits with the kind of syntax that existed then. So there's really 4 books, right? Gospel of the Essene, 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Right.
So this is the most famous one, and it turned on millions of people to this way of life. So I want to say this is great teaching. Yeah. I think he used the archetypes to reach many, many people, and I believe it uplifted many, many people. That's how I would put it. Is it authentic? I think it's questionable. And my answer is, does it matter? No. If you uplift millions of people, turning them on to a spiritual way of life, I mean, is that really a bad thing?
Yeah.
And into that diet and to the whole health thing type code. So, and I would say, based on all my studies of the Essenes, being there on site multiple times, and walking through Qumran, their focus is a little bit more about cleanliness. They had I think it's at least 3 mikvahs right there on site, besides walking distance to the Jordan. and so they were very clean. You didn't go to the bathroom there. You went literally 2,000 feet away.
Mm.
You had to dig a hole. It was like out.
Right.
So their focus was kind of a holistic way of life, dividing it up into 4 hours, 4 hours, 4 hours of service, 4 hours of prayer, 4 hours of kind of healing work. So I think that's the way I would put it, that I think Dr. Seke did a great job. I mean, I know his second wife. I got kind of like an impression of the whole thing.
Yeah.
I can't say that's an original document, but I can say it's a great document.
What about the Dead Sea Scrolls?
Those are real documents. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Now, you founded the Essene Order of Light.
Yes.
Are you trying to keep the Essene lifestyle alive? Is that the purpose behind that?
The way I look at it, because I kind of study it from a different angle, literally going to his home in Costa Rica, knowing his wife, who lives in Canada. It's a way of life that is basically, I kind of go emphasis a little bit more on the live food. I don't think we can absolutely show that there were, except the very, very inner core, they were live fooders. They were vegans, I can say that for sure. So we're pushing how to become a super conductor of the divine. We talk about meditation. Clearly you can see meditation was part of their lifestyle. So it's our typical lifestyle that I support people in doing. And I do train Essene priests and priestesses. I have a whole core of that. I'm actually moving to Israel.
Mm.
Okay, in about a month or two. So it's a whole kind of, again, a lifestyle that I share there, I share here. Obviously, here we are on a podcast, but everything's kind of worldwide.
Right.
There are Essene groups in Europe as well. So I'm in contact with all those. The thing that I've added, which was already there, but with the regular Essene movement, with Dr. Seke and so forth, is they never had what we call haniha. What's haniha? It's the transmission of the spiritual energy. Okay. Now, I know Jesus did that because I know that he did his prayer and then there were flames of fire above his disciples' heads.
Mm.
Do you know what I'm talking about? That's okay. That is what has been missing. And I do that on a regular basis when we have Essene gatherings. So I actually do it on a regular basis every day for people, because what's needed today is people need to spiritually wake up.
Right.
So even though I'm moving there, but I do it at 9 o'clock Monday through Friday mornings. I'm doing 10 minutes of what we call this. Another term is Smika Meshefa in Hebrew. In Eastern tradition, it's called Shaktipat. It's the awakening of the spiritual energy, or Kundalini. So I've been empowered by I really have 3 traditions. It's kind of interesting, so you'll get the weave in just a second, okay?
Yeah.
So we have the yogic tradition. Shaktipat goes back 8,000 years, and we have the time of Avraham, 3,800 years. And I've done, well, the word is aliyah, which it's called the rising up. And so I stayed in a little cave, half cave, where I could overlook the sea. It was desert, didn't have food or water for 3 days.
Mm.
Actually, Abraham came, materialized, and I got that blessing from. And then we have the Native American way. So several of the Native American tribes were actually some of the lost tribes. The Choctaw and Cherokee were actually some of the lost tribes. So there's this other connection. And many Native Americans know this, but basically I talked to one Cherokee grandmother, and she remembers her grandparents speaking Hebrew.
Mm.
So we're looking at a convergence of energy. Now, here's another little tidbit to understand how far this is going. So King Solomon sent down 1,000 of each 12 tribe to Ethiopia. Okay, Queen of Sheba, that stuff, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm in Nigeria, and I'm seeing Stars of David all over the place. So what's going on? And it turns out that they know that they were one of the tribes, or some of the tribes had migrated down from Ethiopia, which is pretty trippy, okay?
Mm.
So they knew their foundation, although they were Christian, they had been converted, was really from one of the lost tribes. So I did as a rabbi, I also did a shamanic Shabbat for them and initiated 13 different sub-tribes. I'm friendly with the king who's there. So they all got reconnected to their Jewish roots through the tribes. So the tribes are all over. I mean, it's pretty fascinating.
It is, yeah.
Big picture. So I've kind of stumbled over. I had no idea, okay, that was there. So I'm taking that Essene energy. I'm taking the doer of the Torah, the Tanakh, what we call the Torah energy around the world, the Torah prophetic energy.
Mm.
So in that sense, we continue the Essene. It isn't as formal, particularly with me moving, but that's what we did. And the Tree of Life, we have chapters around the world. The main places I'm working now, I mean, right now everything's on the internet, will be like we're doing spiritual fasting retreats over the internet. We're doing a kind of a yoga of the mind,
mm-hmm.
doing meditation retreats once a month. So Brazil and Israel are the two kind of places. But I'm transmitting at this point, like tomorrow, every Thursday, I'm transmitting to Israel, Europe, and US, and then also Brazil, and then also all the Spanish people countries at different times because
right.
So we're carrying the energy worldwide. So the advantage of the shutdown, so to speak,
mm-hmm.
not to shut up, but to use
right.
it. Yeah. So the outreach has increased, but it is in essence, it's the prophetic Essene, and I'm going to add again the Haniha, the spiritual awakening energy. See that without that, nothing really it becomes more academic.
Right.
Once you activated the spiritual energy, which again is the initiation, which you can do by look and by touch, and obviously over the internet we do it by look. Really, lots and lots of people are having the Kundalini, or what we call in Hebrew the Ruach HaKodesh, awakened. I wrote a book, Torah as a Guide to Enlightenment.
Mm-hmm.
And now this is not the mainline teaching, okay? People don't think about enlightenment, but at the inner core, absolutely. If you get what I'm saying. A teacher, you can't know God and live. Well, what does that mean? It means you have to disappear as a separate ego.
Yeah.
And so this is moving worldwide. That's my intention. Just to be doing it more for Israel than other places. And we're just going to keep the energies going now that the internet thing has opened up in that way.
Do you feel more of a need to be teaching the spiritual side instead of the dietary side?
Yes.
Yes.
But you can't separate it. See,
right.
The 6 foundations and 7-fold peace. Let me explain. Okay, the 6 foundations is at least an 80%, 100% vegan diet to help you become a superconductor of the divine. Then second foundation is either yoga or Tai Chi, Qigong, whatever, sacred dance to help open the energies that way. Third is service and charity. It's a big part of the Essenes. I mean, a third of their day, 4 hours is set aside for service and charity. The fourth is working with a spiritual teacher, and they all had mentors. There was layers in the Essene, the spiritual mentors.
Right.
And so without using certain titles like Dr. Essene did, the whole idea of spiritual mentorship is extremely important.
It is.
The meditation and prayer, and finally, the awakening of the spiritual energy, which we call Shaktipat in the East, but Smikameshefa or Haniha, which is what Jesus did. And then it's kind of lost, and I'm bringing that back.
What about Shekinah?
The Shekinah energy is the dance of the sacred, divine, feminine in all creation. And it is more general than just Kundalini in a sense, the way I'm talking about it. So when with Haniha is awakened, then you begin to see the dance of the sacred feminine in all of creation. So the sacred feminine is, absolutely part of that dance, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what we're doing. Now, the sevenfold piece was taken from Dr. Seke's work, which he took actually from earlier works where they had actually 16. Okay? And that's peace with the body, like we said, peace with the mind, meditation, peace with the family, sacred relationship. Right. So in the Torah way, sacred relationship is seen as a spiritual path to liberation. Okay? You're not even considered a teacher until you're 40 and, are married and have children and so forth. Okay? Fundamental. That's a little different than the Eastern tradition. Okay? But that's hardcore as part of it. I'm also making a point that many of the scenes were married. Qumran was a training place where basically people were brahmachari or celibate for that training time. But obviously, how did Jesus happen? How did John the Baptist happen? Right. People were married.
Right.
So people took a little bit what they see at Qumran, this is the way history doesn't work, and said they were all celibate. Well, no, you're going to school, and that's not what we have in school today, but you're going to school, you need to be focused on meditating in your studies. But the majority of the scenes were married and were at least vegan. Peace with all cultures. This is an important thing because it means peace with the living planet, peace with the plant people, the flying ones, and walking ones, and peace with all human cultures. Peace, I call it sacred ecology, and peace with the divine. So I redefined that sevenfold piece as he took it from the 16th Sumerian to his sevenfold piece, but I then took it not bowing to angels, because that's not really the real teaching. Bow to angels, even bow to God, right? It's simple, okay? So he kind of went a certain way with it. So do you see what I'm saying? So that's kind of the core teachings. Bottom line, it's simple. Learn to live in a natural way that brings you to liberation. That's what one sentence, that's the whole story.
Yeah.
That's what the book is about, Into the Nothing. And that's really what the Essene teachings are, in a one sentence.
Let's go back 40-something years ago, back when you were 30. I read that you went off to India for 7 years.
Right.
And you studied with a guru, right?
Right. First of all, I was with my whole family.
Okay.
And it's not like you learn, okay? It's about being transformed. So in those key years, you really begin to experience. Like, I'm meditating 6 hours a day. I'm spending 4.5 hours in service. Then I'm spending 2 hours with him with a big group. You see what I mean? And so there's a transformation of consciousness. So that's probably more what I can say. Yeah, we had courses. Yes, I have a background in the Vedic scriptures and Kashmir Shaivism. That is incidental, okay? What you learn as God dwells within you as you, and to live as the truth of the divine, seeing God dancing in all creation. And that's what you learn, but you don't learn it, you apperceive it. It becomes your awareness. Do you see what I'm trying to say here?
Mm-hmm.
So in the liberation process, which I was acknowledged, is that you see the dance of the divine in all creation, including yourself. And into the nothing, if you go into the nothing in meditation, you actually get that's the truth.
Okay.
So when you're meditating hours a day and that's what you're experiencing, you give up your identification with the ego. So one of my teaching is personality is a case of mistaken identity.
Yeah, right.
Now, is that a learning or is that a direct experience? It's a knowing. So the shift was more about knowing. And that was we're down to one word again, right? Knowing the truth.
So, I mean, back when you were 30, I mean, you were fresh off of getting your doctorate just a few years earlier, right? And here you are off to India. And you said you went with your whole family?
Because one of the things that Muktananda, he really supported kids. Okay. If I'm giving what we call Shakti Parahaniha and it's pregnant woman, I give Shakti to the baby, in the womb, and the baby starts getting activated and moves around. So his message is, at any age, the kids really are ready to understand the spirituality. So part of the whole spiritual path. There was a school for them. We had, for example, what we'll call meditation intensives or 2 days intensives, kind of like what I'm doing now over the internet. Both my kids, my daughter when she was 5 and my son when he was 8, took this. They sat for 2 days meditating, in talks and different things. So it's a total family thing. So what I'm saying is, which is very much Torah teach it, isn't it? It's like, no, separation is, spiritual life is not separated from your everyday life. There is no separation here. It's simply a way of life. We're not learning techniques that, I'm going to meditate, I'm going to do this technique. It's not about that. It is actually about becoming that way of life. The natural way of living that leads to liberation is the key. And that's what our whole family had the opportunity to experience.
And when you came back from India, is that when you jumped into the Kabbalah and the Essenes?
Yes. I kind of had studied that a little bit, and I didn't really have anyone that knew that much about these things. I mean, people said they're a Kabbalah teacher or this or that, but it wasn't until I came back and I already, from another perspective, had I was steady in the truth of that self-realization. Then I could understand what the Torah was about. I couldn't understand before because there weren't teachers who know. So you have the Torah, you have the New Testament. People don't know these things because they hadn't had the direct experience. It was only then that I could really make it work for in my Western world.
And that's when you became a rabbi, right?
Yes, 2008, right.
Wow. So you're in India for 7 years. You come home to be a rabbi.
I came back in 1983, okay, and I did a 40-day fast without, again, food or water for the last 3 days, and I was leaving my body. I was really pretty intense. A voice rang out, we called the Mama Daka, the voice of God, the whisper of God, and said, no, return your body, and now you have to go to your roots. So I had a direct transmission that's what I had to do.
You said the last 3 days was dry fasting?
Yeah, of the 40-day.
Wow. Yeah, you don't hear of too many people doing 40 days.
Right. So, and again, when I took Aliyah, it was in the desert where I'm talking about, above Arad. You can see I was like in a little mountain cave where I think a Christian mystic had been one of them. It's like no water, no food for 3 days. Well, in the desert, you can die in a day,
Right.
honestly. Okay, you can dehydrate. Desert's a little different. But because of all that I've been through, I'm fine. I could do it. You see what I mean? So your body has to kind of transform is what I'm trying to say here.
Mm.
And then not so hard.
So here we are, about 40 years later.
Yeah.
And you're what? You're about 77.
Yeah.
So being a senior and a veteran of all this, what would you say is the keys to living a long, prosperous life?
The answer is living in a natural way that keeps you awake and maintains the liberated awareness is the key. Whatever happens after that's not my problem.
Right.
Okay. Now, is it working? Well, at 77, I do 1,000 push-ups 3 times a week. I guess we call that working, or 80 pull-ups. So I maintain a certain amount of physical, and I'm on, I don't eat much. I just have one lunch, live food lunch, like a salad.
Mm.
And a little goji berries in the morning. That's it. It's like your body keeps transforming, is what I'm trying to say here.
Mm.
So I don't know what comes next, but I know that I'm able to eat less, maintain obviously. How many people do 1,000 push-ups 3 times a week? Not too many, right?
Not me.
So here I am at 77 doing that. When I was a captain of an undefeated football team, Amherst College, I could do 70 push-ups. So how is it that 57 years later, I'm like,
yeah,
10 times more? How's that happen? Well, it's lifestyle. So what my message here is, longevity is not my problem. That's up to God.
right.
I'm living a lifestyle that maintains optimum health, optimum spiritual awareness, and going deeper and deeper. So I'm going to put that in the context. One of my guru uncles, he and Mukta, acknowledged me as being liberated, but he also made a caveat point. You're at the beginning. You're at self-realization. Is more before you go to what we call moksha or God merging. Okay? And so, and I'm going to now go back to Rabbi Nachman, who's kind of a liberated 1800s, 1802 type person, who said, every time I'm starting over. Every time I get to a certain level, I'm starting over. So I see life as continually starting over. Okay? So it's a natural way of living that leads to maintains or leads to liberation, keeps you in the nothing.
Yeah.
It's a whole lifestyle. But it's also an attitude of you're always starting over. You don't ever think you've attained anything.
Right.
So those are the way I look at it. Now, I could live a long time, but it's not my problem. That's God's problem.
Right.
I have a mission, that's fine. So I don't have a goal that way. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I have to be, I call it the eternal presence. What does that mean? I'm experiencing the past, the present, what people call now, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So the future, simultaneously.
Mm.
Fine. So in a sense, we have choices. I kind of see that we're given the movie theater, but we get to choose the movie. So we have a destiny, but we have choices within that destiny and what octave you're going to live at. So I'm choosing the octave that I'm talking about, So that's how I look at it. I'm not going anywhere, but I'm aligned with the divine. My will is aligned with the divine will. So that's it. Not worry about it. And one more thing. You asked about prosperity.
Yeah.
And we're abundant, but that's the point. That that's secondarily to you have to do your dharma, which includes right livelihood, but highest dharma is to keep going deeper into the divine. And everything else has to come after that. So prosperity or not is not a a goal. Oh, well, the real prosperity is spiritual wealth.
Right.
So that's how I kind of look at it. We're fine, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Is that is not even an interest. I have to support my family, and I don't. One other caveat here: I don't depend on my spiritual work to make money. I'm a holistic physician. Why? Well, that I can't be bribed. This is a very, very important concept. I'll tell a short story, real short. So these two people, they're in Israel. There's a huge flood. And there's an older man, a younger man, and the younger man helps the other guy get across the river. He needed help. It was just too much. And they said, where are you going? Well, I'm the judge, and I have to judge on this case. Well, the guy says, well, I'm one of the people in the case. So the judge says, hey, well, then I have to disqualify myself because you did something nice for me. It's going to affect my opinion. So in the ancient times, not like what we see today, right? You can't be bribed. So I don't depend on my economics from students. It's very, very important principle. Because then I can just stay in the truth because I don't really care what happens. I mean, I care what happens, but not on that level. It can't be bribable as a spiritual teacher.
Right. Understood.
Yeah.
Arguably the greatest teacher, Gautama the Buddha, once said that there's 4 levels to enlightenment. Mm-hmm. The first one being entering the stream, or as you called, self-realization. Right. And so you sort of touched on this. It's like once you kind of enter, there's more. Right. And the more you discover, the more you realize that you don't know much, right? Because it's the universe is too vast, right?
That's why you always have to be a beginner. That's the safest way.
Right, the Zen way, always a beginner.
But there's also the Torah way. Got to have that in. Rabbi Nachman, that was his big teaching. Meditate in the fields, but you're always starting over.
Why do you think Kabbalah was created? Because Kabbalah came after, long decades after, right? And it was a way to translate the Torah, a way to decode the Torah with the Zohar and whatnot.
So the way I look at it is you have the Torah, and then the Kabbalah is a mystical interpretation of the Torah. Now, that's probably the easiest way, okay? And there's levels of understanding. One is Shvat, which is direct, literal, okay? And that a lot of people resonate on that level. You just look around the world. We see how people are different. The second is metaphorical, okay? Third, I'm not using the Hebrew term. So third is just a deeper interpretation. And the fourth, what we call sod, is mystical. So the Kabbalah is the lower mystical. What I'm teaching is the higher mystical, dissolving into nothing. They don't teach that in Kabbalah. Okay, it's much more metaphysical, or what I call lower soul, which is spiritual, but it's the metaphysical interpretation of the Torah. So, which is very important. But that's how it came about a few hundred years later. Well, not a few hundred, about 200 AD. But then what I'm teaching and sharing is the direct apperception, which I call upper soul. So we're not metaphysics. We just know there's only that. God dwells within you as you. God is everywhere. Done. The Shema, God is the many and the one. So you know the one, but really God is everywhere. Mm-hmm. So it's beyond the metaphysical. Does that make sense? Yes. Kabbalah is metaphysical. So that's kind of the way of looking. So there's 4 levels. And then there's the sod, metaphysical, lower soul, and then direct knowing. Ein Zo. Just direct knowing. I don't want to start using terms. That's good.
Why are so many people put off by the term mystic?
It's a very interesting question. No one has ever asked that question before. So good for you. So I think that people who are operating out of the box generally are perceived as a threat. And so what happened to Socrates? Right? Mm-hmm. Socrates. Okay, what happened to Cassandra? Are you familiar with Cassandra? She was a liberated person. The crowds killed her. Okay, she was another Greek. The point is that people are threatened if you're out of the box.
Yeah.
Okay, and if you take your mask off, so to speak. And so I think that's why the word mystic is to some is threatening for that, and that's been kind of throughout history. I don't think that's a new type of situation, but I think it's human nature. Wow, they know more than me. There's something beyond that scares me, and they represent the unknown. Okay, the unknown is key. I talk about is fear of the unknown.
Yeah,
it's a big deal. So suddenly you got a mystic. They represent the unknown. It's like, whoa. But one thing I teach, based on my own experience, is we need to confront our own fear of the unknown as part of our spiritual path. It's like, it's okay. It's okay to be afraid. Okay? It's okay to go into sacred relationships because love helps you overcome your fear of intimacy. And in spiritual life, love of God, David Coote, helps you overcome your fear of going into the unknown. So it's kind of repeated at multiple levels. So I think that's why the word mystic, thank you for bringing it up. That's why the word mystic, mystics scare people. And you have to be kind of clever how you work with it. So,
well, mystic is the reason why this podcast exists, because I met one in 2012 and it changed my life.
Nice.
So
nice.
If it wasn't for that, then just...
But you were ready, you see. You were ready. Not everybody, as you probably have noticed, is ready.
Right. So when you're ready, it appears.
It appears, but part of being ready is to know there is a certain amount of fear that comes up at a certain point, fear of the unknown. And once you're forewarned, it's a whole lot easier to deal with it.
Right.
But I teach that in my book, Into the Nothing, the same thing. It's a real thing. I go through my experience when I hit that piece. It's like, okay, don't get discouraged. Don't freak out. Just know it's part of it, and then you have to deal with your fear and overcome it.
Behind you in your office, I see a book that says, "May the Force be with you." I believe that's what it says.
Yes, it does. Yes.
And okay, so that's a famous line from Star Wars. Right. And that's an interesting topic. I bring it up on this podcast often because it's pretty obvious that George Lucas took the concept of the Jedi from mystics.
Yes.
Or Zen masters or Sufi masters or, whatever.
Mystic warriors.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so the force is happening. We can also call it there's two levels of Kundalini, the inner Kundalini and the cosmic Kundalini, or Shekinah energy, and that's the force. And the whole idea is to align yourself with that. That's why I have it there. I have it right behind me so people interviewing me can see it.
Do you think George Lucas knew what he was doing, or was it just a happy accident?
I think he knew, but I don't want to comment too much. I think he knew to a certain extent.
He was going with fiction and just...
No, he had to have some insight. I mean, he lived in Marin County, nearby where I used to live. And I kind of heard rumors who he was. I think he had definite spiritual understandings. That, I don't know him. I don't know him. I never met him. But you follow what I'm saying? I don't think it was an accident.
Yeah. And it's the movies are just... I only watch them for the Jedi scenes,
Yeah. There's just this bigger picture in life that he was pointing out. And to me, what's needed is spiritual warriorship.
Yeah.
And what in yoga we talk about yugas, eras of time. So we're moving from the businessman yuga into the spiritual warrior yuga, which is about uplifting all of humanity spiritually. Some people feel these are 1,000, 2,000 year cycles. Some people say more. But some people feel it began in 2010, moving into the spiritual warrior yuga. And so the Jedis and all that were spiritual warriors. Just a comment on that,
Earlier, you said at the end of your big 40-day fast that you were leaving the body and you came back. Have you had other experiences where you've left the body, little astral type stuff or soul travel, anything of that nature?
Well, yeah, but I wasn't exactly talking about that. I mean, yes, I was, that you leave in your soul energy, and there's an astral form that you're leaving in. Yeah, that happens all the time. But when I say into the nothing, I want to clarify, there's no form. Right. There's no tunnel. You're gone. You don't exist anymore. So I'm talking about, you can't know God and live is you actually into the nothing means you're gone. There is no separation, which is very different than an astral form where there's still a you, right? Floating around, but there's still a you. So I make a big distinction that way. Every time I meditate, I don't go into the nothing. I disappear. There's no me. There's no anything. There's just existence.
Right.
So, go ahead.
Could you tell me more about the experience you had with Abraham?
So here I am, kind of in this cliff, in a half cave. So it's a little hot during the day, overlooking the Dead Sea. And I'm starting to hear bells and sheep, like somebody's sheep herding. There are no sheep in that area, okay? There are these mini tiger type things that are there, but there's no sheep. So suddenly I'm hearing the bells, I'm hearing the sheep, the noises. And then it's at night. I have a little fire going just to keep a little warmth at night. And he appears. Now, one of the things you do, because you can see apparitions, is it real? Is it a demon? Well, there are certain ways you have to determine that. Simple, you have to see that they're human feet. You also have to repeat the name of God. Demons can't be in the presence of the name of God. So once we did that, okay, once we clarified at that level with him, then it was just the presence of his divine love. And his message was to walk before God and be a blessing to the world. And the NLC be a love blessing, because his tent was open on all four directions. He could receive people from all the directions. Big metaphor. So what happened is he didn't say anything particularly. He just transmitted this idea of love, because he's known as love. Okay, that's his, okay. And not just love, but to be a blessing, to walk before God as a blessing to the world. So he transmitted that energy to me. And he was there for 30, maybe a minute max.
Wow. So how do you do in the presence of God, in the name of God? Is it like a prayer or?
Well, like we started with the meditation, emerging heart and mind, but it's a way of living that brings holiness into every action. So if we go back a little bit, so traditionally, both in Eastern and Western traditions, we don't start with thoughts, we start with an energy. Okay, so if the energy is starting with love, which is what I got from Abraham, comes into a thought, then it comes into words. then it comes into sentences, then it comes into action. But the key is to start all that with love. The universal love, the oneness love, non-causal. Key to relationship, same thing. Your partner stimulates it, but you have to be in your own state of non-causal love coming from within. And then it gets amplified from without. If you see where I'm going with it. So if you're starting every action, every thought, every word with love as your non-causal, and in the scene, peace also, love and peace, then that's what guides all communications. Does that make sense what I'm trying to say?
Yes. So you've been a holistic doctor for so long, and then behind the scenes, you're a mystic.
Right.
Who's more dangerous to the person that doesn't understand, the mystic or the holistic doctor?
We ask very interesting questions. As you probably know, many holistic doctors actually have been assassinated in this country.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I don't know what the number is. Could be 80, something like that. It's a lot. I feel somewhat protected because my real teaching is the spiritual, and it's less of a threat in a way, because the holistic physicians are a threat to the pharmaceuticals, if you get what I'm saying here.
Yeah.
And there is a threat that way. So mine is much more of a holistic everything. And so I'm not like dealing with the pharmaceuticals and so forth. We're talking about a way of life. We're talking about spiritual awakening. I believe that's less of a threat. I have a friend, he's still alive, in Switzerland, but the pharmacies, and he's very more aggressive, holistic, and they just said, if you keep this up, we're going to kill you. That's straightforward. So he kind of backed down and actually left Switzerland to France and began teaching in different ways. But you get what I'm trying to say. So he was attacking the pharmacies. Right. I never do that. I never do that, if you see what I'm saying. Yeah. I mean, take a look around. All the media pretty much is not allowing any kind of serious discussion about anything out there, right? That's holistic. It's all taken down. But if we kind of focus on the spiritual, it is less threatening. That's the way I would look at it.
Interesting.
I do both. I mean, I with the COVID, this and but the fundamental is if you're just looking at your physical body, you really aren't. It doesn't matter,
right?
Yeah. So my focus is more spiritual. It's going to get more and more spiritual,
right?
Because that's the only thing in my world. The only thing that really matters is waking up spiritually, supporting people waking up spiritually. And a lot of people feel a little bit isolated.
Right.
So if I can support people waking up spiritually, and then I say, my books come out, it's going to be a real strong kind of teaching, but simple. All life experiences, if you understand it with the right angle, are to help you evolve spiritually. Okay, it's just real simple. And then living your life in the context of bringing holiness to all that you do.
I asked that question because it's so fascinating to me and interesting, because I know another holistic doctor who was also a mystic behind the scenes, Dr. Robert Morse.
Right.
I had him on this podcast. I asked him the question. I said, if none of this matters, if we're all particles and energy, what are you teaching health for? And he's like, well, yeah, we just got to kind of reverse people's karma. Kind of, some people are sick, and we gotta help them on their way.
Well, I think it's a bigger picture. When you're fully healthy, it's much easier to become a superconductor of the divine.
Yes.
Okay, and another level is you need to be healthy enough to maintain to let your spiritual awareness evolve.
Yeah.
So you need both of those things happening. So it isn't a contradiction. You want to be able to hold that full energy. So, and it's just part of the whole thing. When we look at holistic, it's physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual.
I'd love to get you and Robert on the line at the same time. That would be fascinating.
You can do that in the future. That's good.
I have seen in my experience that many gurus, self-realized people, teachers, awakened teachers, sometimes they're chubby. And I've heard that sometimes a self-realized person needs to do something earthly to stay in their body. For some, it might be sex. For some, it might be food. For some, it might be, Satguru, who is a known teacher now in this era. He rides a motorcycle. He plays golf. So, what's your earthly thing that keeps you here and grounded?
As I say, when I was leaving my body, God said, you need to go back to your roots, and you're not done yet, basically. So I had a direct transmission to say, no matter what you want, this is your job. So what keeps me is Dharma, okay, which is to help as many people wake up as possible. That is a very earthly thing. I'll put it that way. But I, as a holistic physician, you do physical activity. I mentioned 1,000 push-ups 3 times a week, and then you do, that's earthly, okay?
Good point.
I'm not doing a garden so much at this moment, but we are doing, the garden work. I'm in a relationship, sacred relationship for, that's earthly. I have my grandchildren I'm speaking to. I'm doing, so there's a lot of earthly things happening in a natural way.
You enjoying your life experience?
Yes. The whole way is to be fully alive with everything happening.
Yeah.
So I don't create a separation. For me, all of creation is the play of the divine. So that keeps me in the earth. I don't have a separation, if that makes sense.
How would you compare the Torah to the Vedas, since you have experience with both?
In the end of the story, they're both about merging with God. So you have the Advaita Vedanta, niti, nothing is real. Okay. But then you have what we call, it's not Vedas, but Kashmir Shaivism, which is yes, everything is real. Everything's the divine. So that's the Indian thing. So you got both sides of the story there. The Torah is the same thing. There's only God. That's it. In a sense, you, as I say, you can't know God and live. That's the same message. What's the difference? Well, there is a difference. There's much more emphasis on daily life, on family life, the power of relationship as a spiritual path. Much more emphasis on that in the Western Torah tradition. But the overall picture is still the same. The goal of life is to merge with God, to know God. So we call it in the Hebrew, Devikut Heirut. What does that mean? Devikut means God merging. Okay. Heirut means, in a sense, enlightenment. So from God merging, you get the enlightenment. And that's pretty much what is taught in the other, in the Vedas as well. So at the deeper level, they're similar. At the outer level, much more emphasis on relationship and worldly life as a way to wake up in the West. You don't really emphasize cave dwellers, okay, as you would in the East.
Dr. Cousens, I've been so fortunate. Like I mentioned earlier, I met a mystic in 2012. He mentored me for 7 years. And then I found a living, awakened teacher who's helping me now. And I get to talk to great people like you on this podcast. Can you let the listeners know how important it is to have an awakened teacher?
You have to wake up. And so what I teach is the teacher is a very important milepost along the way. But in the end of the story, you have to walk into the promised land yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that sense, Moses' message, because he couldn't go into the promised land with the people, because they had to walk in by themselves to do the final awakening. So I think it's, so I don't emphasize about a teacher so much as teacher as a spiritual support. A teacher who can see behind you where you're missing the mark, so to speak. A teacher also who can awaken you energetically and support you energetically. There's different levels. And the teacher's going before you and has already fallen in most of the holes, right? So you get that kind of guidance as well. What is important in a teacher is certainty that there's only God, and certainty in the spiritual path of my world as a way of natural living to wake up to that truth. And so I'm going to emphasize teachers who are not separate from the world. You know, in a sense, Buddha was not, he was brought up as a prince, he wasn't separate. There, Moses, he's got all these people around him, and you know, he's got a sister saying, why aren't you really with your wife? And, you know, it's a very interesting scene in general, but it's all about living in a context that inspires people to wake up.
Why do you think so many people take the Torah so literal and don't decode it like Kabbalah does?
Well, it's the same thing what you have in Christianity.
Right.
That people will take it literal, people will take it more mystically. And same thing when you're looking at the Vedic thing. You have the priests who take it extremely literally, and then you have the mystics who really aren't all that interested. So I'm looking at human nature, and I'm looking at the way God lays out in all the traditions that some people need to be concrete because that's where they are in their consciousness, and other people, you know, have a bigger view. So I kind of see it that way. When you kind of look at across all the different ways, you're always going to have that orthodox, right? You're always going to have your Brahmin priests, and there are all these rules and all these things you have to follow, or you get what I'm trying to say. But that works because you have to have a foundation. Some people just need that to get started. They need that rigidity. But as you wake up, then of course it's a binding. So what I teach is all religions are holy lies. Okay? Because we have to transcend them, but also people need them as a foundation so you can transcend them. You need morals, you need ethics, you know, you need a certain amount of order, but you have to transcend that.
And language.
Yeah, you need language, and so that's how I see it. And everybody's at different levels. So, but it's the same mentalities at different layers in all the different traditions.
So your new book is coming. Is it your 10th book?
13th.
13th. Wow. Okay.
You know, and it's into the nothing, and it's really a spiritual autobiography. It is. In each chapter is all these literally teachings. And it's like seeing the progression. Here we got this football player. It's kind of all I ever learned from life was from meditation, playing football, and sacred relations. You know, and it's taking all of life as a way to help you wake up and stay awake and keep progressing spiritually. So it's coming out October 2nd as the book, but also as an audio. And that's kind of fun. I've never done audio before. So
it's a new era, isn't it?
Yeah. So a lot of energy can come through that. And then internationally, that's October 2nd, which is very special. Internationally on the 16th. It'll be worldwide.
That's funny because I was working on something with the word nothing too.
Uh-huh.
It's a very important word.
Oh, yeah. Into the nothing, there's no you.
No thing. No thing.
Right. Nice. Very good.
What do we have to do to create more mystics? And how would the world be if there were more?
Oh, for me, it'd be a whole lot more fun. I think that we're going to go into more of that because people are going to see the material world is not exactly working for them. And so, to me, the more we can get out these, more of the mystical teachings, the more people are going to say, well, I need something because what is happening isn't working. So I think it's going to happen for itself, but we have to be there to be the groundwork to support that. So our work is like what we're doing, sharing the teachings, bringing the whole idea of mysticism into the bigger picture as a valid way of living your life, understanding your life, and living your life. And then the rest happens because of all the societal conditions and so forth.
And that's a great place to end right there.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the interview, and really may all the listeners be blessed that we really wake up to the truth of who we are and continue to keep waking up.
Dr. Cousens, truly a pleasure.
Okay, very good.
What a convo, right? Interestingly enough, I just said a few episodes ago that I was working on an autobiography called Chasing Nothing. It sounds like we were on the same vibe, Dr. Cousens and I. This episode is just packed. And if you've been listening since episode 1, this episode almost feels like a cherry on top of everything that's been discussed. Be sure to check out my meditations on Spotify and Apple. And my Patreon page is launching soon. It might even be up right now, where you can support this podcast. And then in turn, I can support you. Next episode is number 70. It's a milestone. I'll talk to you then.
Thanks for listening to Inner Peace with Dr. Reese. If this episode opened your heart, feel free to share on social media and tell your loved ones. Also, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Until next time, may peace be with you.